So now that both of the eyes are done, we're going to go ahead and add in the whiskers and a few of the wispy lines. So what we're going to do is just erase any graphite lines that you've already put down here. And we're going to fill in these ones just here, the whiskers on the eyebrows, a few of the strands of fur through the middle of the forehead there. So we're just going to use the 0.6mm to begin with, and then where there are some thicker lines, then obviously you need to use a thicker embossing tool. Now if you don't want to use an embossing tool, you can use a sharp white pencil, or you can add this or these lines in afterwards with a gel pen. So if you don't have an embossing tool, you can use other methods, but if you do have an embossing tool handy, then this is what we're going to use. So basically you just want to use the embossing tool, you want to use it in the direction that the whiskers and everything are going. And then where you have thicker ones, you want to use the larger side. And then there's some wispy ones coming off the side over here, so I'm just going to add some of those in. Some through this area just here. And then down at the bottom of the tear ducts down here as well. So exactly the same process, just erasing the graphite, then just using the embossing tool and indenting the paper so you form those grooves. And we're just going to do exactly the same on this side here. And down this bit as well, a bit on the tear duct here. And then there's just a few strands down the bottom here. I think that's pretty much it for all of those marks. So now what I'm going to do is just go through and map in all of the dark areas within the piece here. So what I'm going to do is just sharpen up the warm grey one. I'm going to use this first just to map all of those bits in. And we're just going to basically just work from one side, from the left hand side to the right hand side. Just adding a base layer of the warm grey one to begin with. So just where we've got all of the darker areas, just going to add this down. So just using really light shading just to get these initial bits down. And you want to work in the direction that the fur is going in. So it's really important that you analyse the direction of the fur, because obviously there are some fur direction changes as you work around the face. So you just want to make sure that you get those in the correct area. I'm also going to add the dark line at the side of the eye here. I know it's not completely black, but it's quite a lot darker than the rest of the fur, and I just want to add that in as well. So just adding a base layer to that area. And once we've finished adding in all of these areas, then we can go ahead and add a darker colour on top. And then once we've added a darker colour, we can go ahead and add the base layers to the entire portrait, and then we can start to blend everything in together. So just plotting in all of those darker areas. Just erasing a little bit of the graphite, just so it doesn't shine through. So again, this side of the eye, just mapping in this dark stripe coming off the side. And you've got this dark patch underneath this eye just here. So you just want to shade back and forth really, really lightly. You don't want to put much pressure through your pencil whatsoever when you're doing this. So now that we've got that initial base in, then I'm going to go ahead with a dark sepia and just really lightly shade some of these dark areas in. I'm not going to go ahead and shade heavily. Again, just want to use a light pressure. Where you have some more of the softer colours, I'm literally just going in and just using some really soft fur lines just to add in that darker area. We can tone it up with some browns and everything later on, but I just want to get in the initial areas and the initial dark tone of these. So I'm just going through and I'm just using really small strokes with my dark sepia pencil and adding this in. So I just want to build up the colour like this. So this central section I'm just going to pretty much just add in the dark sepia at the very edges, because this is quite ticked with a lot of white still, so I don't want to fill it completely with the dark sepia. So I'm just really lightly just flicking the pencil off at the edges, just leaving that middle bare in there. So this section underneath the eye contains quite a lot of brown tone. So again, I'm just doing the same. I am making some quite sporadic strokes with my dark sepia pencil, so I'm leaving quite a lot of space in between them and just really loosely adding the hairs down, making sure that I am going in the direction of the fur though. You just get that initial dark area down, just that hint of dark sepia. I'm just going to continue with the tear duct area here. So I'm just going in with a little bit of a heavier hand right next to this tear duct here, just to really get that colour down. Just bring the shape of the eye down a little bit more as well. Like so. So now what I'm going to do is pretty much just add a layer of the warm grey one over the entire area apart from through the middle here. So I'm going to go around this white area in the very middle. I'm just going to add the warm grey one in the direction that the fur is going, all over. So now we've mapped out the dark areas, so we're not going to lose those once we add this layer all over. And then we can start to build up some more of the browny sort of soft wheaty tones within the cat's fur, and then build in some more of that dark tone. So what I'm going to do is just get rid of some of the graphite lines through here, just erase them very lightly so I can just about see them. Same on this side as well. So I'm pretty much just going to add the warm grey one over the entire area, just working in the direction that the fur is going in. So it's really important to make sure that you do pay attention to your fur direction. I just want to use really light shading, just back and forth, and to get that really light layer and to make sure that you don't put too much pressure through your pencil and end up damaging the tooth of the paper. Just hold your pencil quite far back, so you can see how I'm holding mine here. I'm not holding it right down here and holding it right vertical to the paper. I'm holding it at the side like this, and I'm just shading back and forth, holding the pencil quite far back. You just get a really nice even coverage down on your paper that way. Whereas if you hold it quite close to the end or to the lead of the pencil, you end up getting a really streaky kind of finish. So you want to make sure that you eliminate that streaky finish, and one of the ways that you can do that is just by holding your pencil quite far back, just shading back and forth really lightly. So I'm just working in the direction of the fur, adding it all over. So on the top side of the eye, the fur tends to curve over the eye this way, and then as you work back down this way, it sort of comes up towards the forehead, and then as you work on the underneath of the eye, it curves around this way. So you really want to pay attention to the way that the fur moves around certain features on your portrait. So as I said, I'm going to avoid adding any of the warm grey one to the very centre of the cat's face for now. Just going to focus on the areas around the eyes for the time being. So that's that side done. I'm just going to add in this bit right next to the eye here as it comes up to that white patch down the centre. And then all at the top here. Again, making sure I follow the fur direction. So we come across to this other side now as well. Just going to do exactly the same. So I'm just going to give my pencil another sharpen as well. It's really important to maintain that sharp point so you can get that nice smooth even layer as well. And try not to knock over the pencil sharpener, sorry about that guys. Okay, the pencil completely broke, so just going to give that another quick sharpen. Okay, so we've got that initial base layer down now of the warm grey one. So now I can start to build in some of those wheaten tones. So to build those, I'm mainly going to use a combination of the brown ochre 10% from the Luminance and the B-Star, a little bit of the raw umber as well. We're going to blend with some white, we're going to add some of the cinnamon down through there. So all of these lovely tones that I've got going on here, so I'm just going to give some of them a quick sharpen. Of course we'll also be adding some browns, all of those kinds of tones as well. I'm just sharpening them so I can redefine those points. Like so. So we're going to start off with the lightest of these colours, which is the brown ochre 10%. And what we're going to do for this one is just basically add this in the areas where we can see that sort of wheaten tone, which is pretty much over the entire area. So we're going to just mimic what we've done for that first layer of that warm grey one. We're just going to hold the pencil quite far back and just going to shade in the direction that the fur is going in. So this should be quite easy for you now because you've already mapped out the direction with your base layer. So you're just following exactly the same pencil marks and the curvature and everything that you've just previously added. So you want a nice sharp pencil, you want to hold it quite far back, you want to use a really light pressure, you want to go all the way over your area. So then where you've got a more sort of grey tone, I'm just going to really gently fade this brown ochre 10% out, and I'm just going to just lift the pressure off my pencil even more and create some fur strokes just going into that area. And then I'm going to add a second layer through here as well. and just darken up a few areas. So the more layers that I build, the closer towards the lead of the pencil I actually tend to hold it. So as I'm building the layers, my hand gets further and further down the pencil, so I can increase the control over the pencil and also increase the pressure. So if I need something just that little bit extra darker, I can hold it a lot closer to the tip there and just focus a lot more pressure just through that area, just to get that shade that I need down there. So I'm also just going to add some of this tone to the darker areas at the sides of the eyes here. Just build in some of that tone as well. So again, just using a light pressure to begin with, just to build that initial colour. A nice wheaty yellowy colour. And then holding the pencil slightly closer towards the tip so I can get a little bit more control over there, a bit more pressure through there to increase that tone. And then I'm just remembering to just blend that out just by lifting the pressure off the pencil and creating these fur lines, just really lightly touching the paper to blend that out. There's also a darker section just down here, so I'm going to add that in as well. This one I'm adding more in the way of fur lines though, and not shading like I've just done those other parts. So I'm just using the point of the pencil, really light hand, just going over, just adding in that darker toned area through here. And remembering to blend it out ever so slightly into the surrounding area so it's not quite as harsh, so it's a really nice soft finish. You can tell from the reference that the fur of this cat is quite soft, so we want to keep that appearance of the fur really soft. So just blending it out using even lighter strokes into the surrounding areas is just going to help convey that texture even more. I'm also just going to shade by the tear duct area here, so a little bit of a wheaten colour. So I'm just shading this area down. So I'm just shading in at the moment the more obvious wheaty coloured areas, like the slightly darker wheater areas. We're going to darken those up and then we're going to go through and add pretty much this colour to the entire area. So I'm also going to do exactly the same on this side. I'm just going to go through and just shade some of this brown ochre 10% down. So you can see as I'm working over these areas that require a little bit more pressure, I'm just holding the pencil slightly differently, holding it much more towards the tip there. And then as I go in and feather it out, I'm holding it quite far back, using a really light pressure just to blend that out. So I'm just concentrating this colour around the tear duct as well. And then again through the corner or outer edge of the eye here, we've got that little stripe. And this side's a lot darker in tone. I'm just going to run this wheaten tone through this dark patch that we've added here, because there's quite a few like sort of burnt sienna-y tones through this section here, as well as these dark lines. So just remembering to blend these areas out. It's always important to remember to blend your areas out, otherwise you're going to end up with it looking a little bit patchy. And you want to avoid it to look patchy. You want to make it look really nice and smooth and silky, as if one colour blends into another. Like so. That's pretty much it for all of the sort of darker wheaten tones. So I'm just going to continue with some of the Beaster, darken them up, add a little bit of the burnt sienna as well. It's going to add that really nice warm tone to a few of these areas. So I'm going to go in with the Beaster first. I mainly concentrate this in the darker areas to begin with. And with this I'm actually just going through and making fur lines, so I'm not going in and adding any of that shading, I'm just going straight in, adding in some nice fur lines, just really gently stroking in the direction that the fur is going. You'll notice as well that I'm working back into the fur, so the fur is actually going this way, but I'm also working back from the fur from this point back to this point, and that just creates a really nice soft edge. So I'm working in two directions just to try and really blend all of that together. You'll notice that it does give a much softer appearance when you do work in that way. So I'm just working from this point to this point, and then from this point to this point. I'm also going to just go through with the Beaster and just add the fur lines and the fur texture all over this wheaten area that we've added here. So I'm coming from this dark area or tear duct around the eye here and just creating fur lines coming off of that, really tiny ones. You want to make sure that you use the correct length of stroke of your pencil. You don't want to make your lines too long, otherwise it's going to look really too furry, and you don't want to make them too short because then it's just going to look a little bit weird as well. So you want to make sure that you are using the right length of line when you're creating your fur. So obviously this fur on the face is a lot shorter, and then as you come around the outside of the eyes and towards the edges it becomes a lot longer. So we'll be concentrating a lot of our shorter strokes in this section and through the middle. Then as you reach the outer edges you will need to elongate your strokes a little bit. So I'm also going to go through this area with some of the walnut brown for the really dark areas, which is directly next to these dark patches. And you'll notice as well that I'm actually adding the Beaster and all of these other colours over these dark patches that I've already added. And again, that's just to help with the blend, make everything look really, really natural as possible. And when you go through and add some of your darker lines in these lighter areas, it really brings that texture to life as well. So I'm done with that Beaster pretty much. I need to go through and add some of the sort of richer reddy brown tones. So I'm going through with the burnt sienna. I'm really paying attention to the reference as well. I'm seeing where the shadows are, seeing where there's any more of these richer, warmer tones as well. So I'm not going to add this all over, just adding this colour in certain areas. And once I'm done with that, then I'm going to go through with the walnut brown. I'm actually going to start to darken these dark patches as well. So I'm going to add some fur lines of the walnut brown through those, or through this area, just to darken it up. Then I'm going to bring some of those fur lines back into the wheaten area. Need to sharpen this pencil as well. So with a nice sharp pencil and a light hand, you can get some really nice precise lines and really get that fur texture in. I'm also going to come from this area around the eye and just blend in this dark patch into the fur a little bit more. And then I'm just going to create some even more darker lines down the bottom here. I'm also going to go through with some of the dark sepia to really darken up some of these sections. But you can see just how I'm using my pencil here. I'm just really lightly stroking the paper, not putting very much pressure through at all, just letting the weight of the pencil pretty much make the lines. And you can see just how I'm holding my pencil as well. I'm not holding it quite far back here because that would get me some really like too softer lines, and I want a little bit more control over my pencil than holding it quite far back like this. So I'm holding it quite close to the tip just so that I can control the direction and the sort of flare of the fur stroke as I'm making it, but I'm not going through and putting heavy pressure through that pencil. Create these darker areas, I'm just building up the layers just a little bit more and concentrating the fur strokes a little bit closer together than I would through this area down here. So if anything, I need to go through with some of the cinnamon and just increase a little bit of that pinky tone. I'm just glazing this colour over the top, and by glazing I'm doing exactly the same thing as shading, just holding the pencil quite far back just to add that little hint of colour through there. I'm also going to go through and just glaze a little bit more of the brown ochre 10%, just to, again, to get a little bit more of that wheaten tone. This is also going to help everything blend together. Then I'm going to take the dark sepia and I'm just going to darken this up with those fur lines, drag some of those into the surrounding fur as well. Again, I need to sharpen this pencil so I can get a really nice precise line. A nice precise line, nice sharp pencil. Just start to add in a little bit more of that detail. So where I do have some more of those prominent fur lines, I'm actually going through it and just putting a little bit more pressure through my pencil. Like so. Okay. So with that darker area mapped in, I'm just going to go ahead and do some more of the darker areas around the eye. So I'm just using that walnut brown, going through with the dark sepia, adding in some of those fur lines, like so. Continuing down this section with the dark sepia as well. So I'm going to switch to the beaster and continue this bit off to the side of the eye. So I'm just going through and using some fur lines and a little bit of shading. So this bit off to the side is a little blurrier, so it doesn't really matter about individual fur lines off to the very, very edges. Just want to give that hint of colour. So over the top of that beaster, I'm just going to go in with the burnt sienna. And then I'm going to go over with some of the walnut brown, darken this up. I'm going to add some of the eyelashes on the top of the eye as well with the walnut brown as I've got it in hand. So just using those fur lines to just create that really soft texture of the eyelashes over here. I'm also going to go and add in this area underneath the eye there. So that's mainly made up of some darker grey, so I'm going to go through that with some warm grey 3, and I'm just going to use those circular motions to add that down. I'm also going to overlay that with some of the mauve. And we're going to add the mauve down, just really, really lightly adding that in. Like so. I'm going to use the white to just blend it out a little bit. And then going through with some of the walnut brown. Just shading this. Also going to add some of the burnt sienna as well. Like so. Just using the dark sepia just to add in some more of those eyelashes and everything around the top of the eye around here. Just to blend all of that area in. Then we're just going to continue with the wheaten coloured first. I'm going to go through and add a little bit more of this brown ochre 10%. Going to concentrate on the underneath of the eye for the moment. So I want to go in through and add another layer, mainly focusing this directly next to this area that we've just added under here, because we need to blend that through the fur. So just shading a little bit more of the brown ochre 10% down there. I'm going to use the burnt sienna. I'm going to give it another quick sharpen. We're just going to add some tiny little fur lines coming off of this area and blend it through the fur. you just want to make really tiny marks coming from this area off into your fur. I'm going to go through there with some of the walnut brown as well to darken it up. Like so. And then we're just going to use the Beaster just to continue adding all of the fur strokes, all of the details and everything through the fur here. I'm going to use some of the nougat as well for that softer brown tone. We also need to go through and darken this area through here. So I'm going to go into this bit with the burnt sienna because it's got more of that richer red tone rather than the Beaster. So I'm just really gently adding this down, making really small fur lines with the pencil and then elongating them as it comes out towards the edges there. Also just using the walnut brown to add a little bit of a darker tone through there. I'm going to go through and add some dark sepia as well. Also going to go through this with the raw umber for a bit more of that yellow tone. I'm actually going to blend with the white pencil through here as well. So we get that really nice soft effect. So we just need to continue to bring this fur and everything round from the eye here. So I'm just going to add a little bit more of the brown ochre 10% into this section directly next to the tear duct here. Blend it through with the rest. And then just build in some of the Beaster. Just around this section here. Just continuing with the Beaster in this area. Also going to run some of the nougat through there because it comes into quite a grey brown tone. And then I'm just going to add some dark sepia through there as well. So also just making sure that I add some of this tone in between all of these embossed hairs at the side here as well, so they really stand out. And just continuing to make it as dark as I possibly can through this section. It's one of the darkest areas on this bit. So really holding the pencil quite close towards the tip, really focusing some pressure down on that pencil. I'm just using the dark sepia to add some lines coming off from around the eye around here. So continuing to just blend this area out so I haven't got all these harsh edges. I'm also going to use some of the burnt sienna through there as well. Just blend it out a little bit more. I'm also just going to add a tiny amount of the mauve, just going to glaze that over the bottom here just to give that slightly cooler tone to that area. And then just going to use the nougat to add some fur lines coming from this bit into this lighter section. I'm also just going to add a further layer of the warm grey one into this section just to darken it up a little bit because it's not quite as bright and white as what's going on there now that we've added in those tones surrounding that area. I'm also going to add a further layer up through here as well. So to help to make it look as if this whiter fur is overlapping here, I could have gone through and used an embossing tool, but I'm going to be able to get that effect just by working backwards into that lighter section of fur. So like I did through here, like I explained that I was going from down here and up, and then from up and down, I'm working backwards into this section of fur. And you get this like little bit of a, like it's overlapping. Then you just darken these bits in between some of the fur strokes, again, to help with that overlapping look. So just continuing to use burnt sienna, I'm going to add a little bit of the nougat through there, as well as some of the warm grey 3. Also going to add a further layer of the brown ochre 10% onto this section just up here. Just to get that more of a wheaty look. Just put a little bit more pressure through the pencil just to get that colour down a little bit more. I'm just going to use the nougat. Add some fur lines through here, mainly coming off of the eye and at the edges of the fur. I'm going to create a really nice soft look for this section. And just swapping out a few colours, going to go through with the walnut brown just to darken up a few sections, add a few more distinguishable hairlines, a few little details. I'm going to go through with the raw umber just to give it a little bit more of that sort of orangey yellow tone as well, so just shading a little bit of this over. This darker patch just here. Then for this lighter area I'm going to go through with the warm grey 3. I'm going to add some really light shading with the cinnamon and the mauve as well. I just wanted to sharpen up that warm grey 3. And I'm just going to add some fur lines through this bit with this pencil. Then I'm going to go through with some of the mauve and some cinnamon as well. These two colours though, I'm just going to use the side of the pencil to shade a little bit of this down. I'm also going to add a tiny little bit of the sky blue through there as well, just to tie in with the colour of the eyes. So you can see I'm holding the pencil quite far back and I'm just really gently stroking this onto the paper. Just want that really subtle hint of colour. Then I'm going to go over with the cinnamon. A little bit of the sky blue as well. And then I'm just going to increase the grey tone here and go over with a little bit more of the Beaster as well. then what I need to do is just add a little bit more of a wheaten tone onto this section here. So I'm actually going to go through that bit with a whole nother layer of the brown ochre 10%. And this bit's quite blurry off to the side here, so we don't have to worry too much about all of the individual fur lines and anything like that. We're just going to go for a really soft suggestion of colour and texture. So in order to get that really nice blurred look, this is where we're going to use our white pencil. So I'm going to go straight in there with the white just to help to blend and blur all of that out. So I'm pushing quite hard at this point because I know I'm not going to need to add very many layers over the top of this. We're pretty much just going to glaze a lot of the colours over, so we're just going to really lightly shade them over the top. Again, just to give that suggestion of colour through there. So I'm going to use the nougat right next to this fur section here. I'm going to use the side of the pencil and just really, really gently glaze some of this colour in. Just build a couple of layers. Make sure it's really blended out into the surrounding areas. I'm also going to go through with the walnut brown. So I'm just going to glaze a little bit more of this colour a little bit further down. And go over with the walnut brown. I'm going to blend those areas out with the white and make them really nice and smooth. And going back in with the nougat, again adding a little further hint of the brown tone. Adding a tiny little smidge of green would be good through here as well. We could even make our own green. I'm just going to try and mix the raw umber with one of the blues, just see if I can get a nice green tone through there. But before I just do that, I'm just going to add a tiny little bit of burnt sienna, just to suggest a little bit more of this sort of tone. Just going to blend that out with the white, and then I'm just going to see if I can create a green tone. Okay, so to try and create a green, I'm going to mix the raw umber, I think, with a little bit of the turquoise. We'll try first. I'm going to put the turquoise down first. And try the raw umber. And go back over with the turquoise. It's quite a bluey green. So then I'll try the Prussian blue. See how that one fares. So I'm going to go with the turquoise. I'm just going to add a tiny little amount of the turquoise down, just really, really lightly shade it. And then really lightly shade the raw umber. Then shade the turquoise back over. And then I'm going to add a little bit of the walnut brown over there to darken it down. And then to blend it all together, I'm going to go through with the white. There's a tiniest little hint of green through there. And then all I'm going to do is just use that nougat and just break up this area a little bit. So I'm going to break up this edge. There we go. And to blur all of that out once more, I'm going to go back in with the white. Like so. So I'm going to use the dark sepia just to add a few distinguishing fur lines through this white section. Just to also give it a little bit more detail and texture. Because at the moment it's just looking a tiny little bit flat. I'm just going to work some of the dark sepia through there. I'm going to work in once more some of the mauve. Like so. So for this top section, just going to pretty much just add an entire layer of this brown ochre 10%. So in this half here, just going to add this all over, and then we will start to add our darker colours over there. So this area up the top is also quite grey and brown in tone. So we're going to actually be using quite a lot of the nougat, the walnut brown and the dark sepia through this section. So I'm just going to sharpen up the nougat pencil. I'm going to need this just to start to shade this area here. So I'm going to start on this blurry section. I'm going to start at the top, just add a really light layer of the nougat down. So just slowly building up this layer, this darker tone at the top here. Working in the direction of the fur, but just using these shading motions because this bit's quite blurry at the top. The only bit that's really in focus is this bit in the forefront just here as it curves round. So that's what I want to try and keep mainly in focus on that part. So I'm just going to add the nougat pretty much up to that area. And as we come around to these in focus parts, that's when I'm going to start to build in some of the fur lines just to intersect that, blend it through. So I'm just slowly building up the layers. You can see just how slowly I'm building them, just going over and over, just shading back and forth. Using some of the fur strokes just to blend out that dark area every now and then. As it starts to come back to this area that's more in focus as well. I'm just going to start to build in the fur lines through this lighter section just here. I'm just going to switch to a walnut brown to add in this dark bit here and start to make these fur strokes. you've got this darker band of first strokes where you've got the more in focus area. That's where all of these darker hairs start to really come into focus. That's where I'm concentrating a lot of this walnut brown.